We're here with Rob from Cirith Ungol. How are you today?
I'm doing really well, thank you.
So you have a new album that's just come out. How do you feel about that?
Well, it was a long time in the making. Dark Parade.
Yeah,
Uh, yeah, I feel really good about it actually.
well, it does seem like it. It feels like it wasn't that long ago, but a lot of the time was spent during the pandemic. So it does feel like some of those years where Cirith Ungol might have been more active were taken away in a way.
Yeah, that's sort of true. Our last album, Forever Black, hit. I think it was like March 20th or something like that. I think it was about the same day the pandemic started, and so we were thinking, how can this happen? And I think we're talking to our manager. Hey, can you call the record company and cancel it? And I'm like, no, it's going to come out no matter what. Uh, but what I think's funny, I've been quoting Morpheus from the movie The Matrix. He goes, fate seems like it has a sense of irony. And our Forever Black was such a dark album about like a horrible future for mankind, pain, suffering, death, destruction. For it to come out during the pandemic seemed like that was a perfect time. Uh, a lot of people around the world suffered way more than we did, but I think for most musicians and people in the music industry, it was a tough time because no one could go out and play and everyone was on lockdown. But also, I think people too had the opportunity to stay at home maybe and listen to a little bit more music. So that might have been one of the only silver linings in that whole episode. So anyway, while that was going on, we were already starting to work on material for another album. And we said, we can't release another full-length studio album during the pandemic. And so a bunch of people had been bugging us, say, why don't you re-record some of your older material? And we always kept saying, no, we don't want to do that. We're getting older. We want to keep putting out new material as long as we can. And we thought, though, hey, this might be the perfect time. And so this album right
Okay.
here, Half Past Human, we did that kind of as a bookmark in between the two studio albums. A lot of people still don't understand why we did it, but I can explain to you very simply. We didn't want to kill another full-length album during the pandemic, and yet we wanted to put something out for people to kind of give them something to listen to, and also keep us busy. Uh, and I think we had a lot of
Plus,
fun with that.
you were in a better position to actually give those songs some life than you were when you originally wrote them.
Yes, of course. And I think in retrospect we could look back. Some of the songs were written like in the 1970s. So it was an amazing. And I think I just listened to it. I haven't listened to that in a while. I listened to it the other day, and I thought that we did a pretty good job on that. So anyway, while that was going on, we were working on this other material, and we finished the album. I think February 20th of this year. It was all mixed down and everything and sent off to the record company, and it was released a couple of days ago.
Yep. Uh, and I've been doing some research, and today was the first day that I actually listened to some of your really old stuff. I've been checking the Orange album, so it's called the demo tape, specifically because it's the only one where you're credited as a lead vocalist on one of the songs.
Yeah, that's funny. That people have been asking, hey, can we get a copy of that? Can we get a copy of that? And to us, that was some of our earliest most primitive material. And I think to some of the guys in the band, who were on that album, were horrified by it because we were really young, when we were doing a lot of that stuff, and we're kind of like earlier on in our career. But everyone. The funny thing is so many people say, oh, they wanted it for so long and they got it and they're really excited about it and they like it. Uh, and we're just once again, we're like, we don't want no one to know who we are. I don't want to say we're embarrassed by it, but it's kind of painful sometimes to listen to some of your earlier. It'd be like if you were an artist, and then in an article they showed pictures you drew it as a kid or something like that. So, but yeah, no, there's some funny stuff on there. I have another funny story about that too. Neil Beatty, original singer in the band,
Mhm.
a couple of weeks ago or maybe a month ago, after we practiced, I came home and I heard someone in my front yard yelling, and I go look out the door and I seen this guy out there and I go, who's that old man? Who's that old man standing in my front yard, right? And it was Neil, our original singer. So we went out to dinner and we talked, and it just kind of brought up some good memories. I think also on that tape, there's a song on there where Tim and Neil both kind of sang together.
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah.
know you're out there, something like that. So
It
I,
was weird being like the Cirith Ungol release that had the most people in a lead singer position, because I think there were some more people credited, not just you and the original singer.
well, that's probably true. Also too, we did background vocals. So whether, we're singing on almost all our albums, we do background vocals. We all get together, in a room, and we're not like, the Beatles or Queen or anything. To me, the best background vocals is all of us yelling like you're in a crowd, like you're an angry mob,
Mm.
uh,
So
like a Blunt and Iron. We have a
like on
song, Blunt and
sec
Iron,
yeah,
it's
or
like
Sacrifice on the new
Blunt and
album.
Iron. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Like on Sacrifice on the new album, was that the gang vocals?
Uh, Actually, I'd say more on Relentless, on the song Relentless. We're all going relentless. Every once in a while, someone will sing, and we'll go, hey, quit singing, just, shout. But you have to shout in tune, I guess, so that's.
Yeah, that's definitely something. So it is weird to think that you were a band that were for obviously you were very young, but you were formed around the same time that metal was starting as, and you had the same sort of the same influence that Black Sabbath, the band credited for being the founders of heavy metal, had. So you were probably all into Cream and Blue Cheer and stuff like that. And you were in California, which I know California is big, probably bigger than a lot of countries in Europe combined. Uh, what was the scene like in the 70s?
Well, probably a lot better than it is today. Actually, I was too young. I was probably around 12 or 13. But Jimi Hendrix played here like just 5 minutes from my house at the beach. Um, and they put up a flatbed truck. And this is back in the day before really fancy concerts. And he played on there, but the fog rolled in from the ocean and they actually had to cancel the concert. But there was another local promoter, Jim Salzer, that still he's passed away, but his family still has a record store here in town, and they've carried our albums from the beginning. But he used to put on all the really good shows in Ventura and Santa Barbara, the town that's kind of right above us on the coast. But he had like the Doors and Jefferson Airplane, Steppenwolf, Iron Butterfly, all the original heavy, psychedelic type bands from that era. And so that was all swirling around us, but like I said, I mean, I can't speak for, today because things have changed so much, but if you can imagine, I'm 13 years old and I go to my parents, hey, I want to go see Jimi Hendrix or Iron Butterfly. And they're like, you're only 13, go in the backyard and play with a hose or something. So anyway, but that didn't stop us from listening to the music. And Greg, the other original member of the band, we'd show up every day at school, and this was probably seventh grade, so we were probably around 13 then. And he'd bring albums like Blue Cheer's first album or Mountain. I remember when he loaned me Mountain, and he'd bring them to me and go, and this is an easier time too. Nowadays, some people may not want to loan someone their album because it's so rare or whatever, but he'd bring it to school in his backpack, and he'd say, hey, I found this new album and it's so amazing. Go listen to it. And I'd go home and listen to it. And I'd probably play it so many times it would wear out the grooves. But the next day I'd go, wow, that was amazing. And the drummer, Corky Lang in Mountain, was always a big influence on me. And that's one of my favorite bands of this day.
Right. Mountain is definitely one of those really unappreciated bands. Like everybody knows Mississippi Queen, but it was around a couple of years ago that their main man had died, and I revisited the album that came right after it, and yeah, that's that. I think there's a lot of music from that period besides the very obvious stuff, and it's usually just one song like Blue Cheers, Summertime Blues, or Inagara da Vida that people look at and pinpoint. Okay, that was historically important for heavy metal, but don't really dive that much into that that entire era, other than the very big
Yeah.
acts.
Well, I'll tell you some stories about Mountain. Uh, I saw him 3 times, and when I first saw him, it was around a time in Nantucket Sleigh Ride. That's like the album that came right after
Yeah,
Mountain
that's the one I was
Climbing.
mentioning.
Amazing. And what that band had, they had the ability to like jam. Like their guitarist Leslie West. People always ask me, "Who's your favorite guitarist?" He was the best guitarist I ever saw. Very heavy, big guy, looked like a giant, like an apple or something, playing a very little small. He played a Gibson uh, Les Paul Jr. Only had one little pickup in it. But then the bass player Felix Pappalardi played kind of like a violin shaped bass, kind of like Paul McCartney had in the Beatles. But they would play together, and the bass player Felix, he'd have this really distorted bass sound, didn't it? It almost sounded like kind of like a guitar, fuzzy guitar, but it was the bass. And they would get together and they would just they would go crazy, and it was just amazing between an organ player in the background and the drummer. Uh, I don't know. It You aren't going to see many bands like that play like that today, and to be able to actually see that when I was a kid, it was. I remember the first time I ever went to the show, first time I ever smoked pot. It was like, wow, this is the most amazing thing I've ever done. So,
So that was your first show.
with Money Metal concert, yeah, it was Mountain, yeah.
All right. Well, I reckon that must have been quite a liberating feeling after what I must imagine, like seeing all those concerts, all the entire scene happening around you and not being able to attend, kind of like uh, a kid looking at the ice cream store but not being able to get any ice cream.
Yeah, but then as we got older, started to go see the concerts. Oyster Cult, was just breaking out. Rush, I told this story a million times, but we went and saw Rush. A friend of mine in Canada said, "Hey, there's a band up here called Rush. And they're playing down in LA, I thought in Hollywood at the Whiskey, right?" And he goes, "You should go check them out." So a couple of us went down there with another friend, and we were the only people there. There was like 3 or 4 of us there, and maybe there was more, maybe like 8, but it was just a handful of people. We ended up going backstage with them, talking to them. We smoked some pot with them too, and made friends with them. And it was pretty amazing because it was, this was before anyone had ever heard of them. And, they were a great band. And, we stayed friends with them for a while, but as they got bigger and bigger, be kind of hard to keep in touch with people, when they're, because our band, we're sort of famous, but we're not rich. But, as you actually get more busier and you're playing shows, it's harder, especially the bigger the show. Someone calls you and say, "Hey, can I come visit you backstage and stuff?" when there's a giant legion of people trying to get backstage. So, I understand that. And that's kind of how we kind of lost touch over the years. But, I remember back to some of those times fondly. Another band that was kind of local that we were buddies with, Yesterday and Today, which turned into Y&T. Very amazing band, especially back then. Their first couple of albums were just really, really good. 2 of my favorite songs all time, "Knock You Out" and "Hurricane." I don't know if you've ever heard those, but if you haven't, go check them out because they were, and I think they're still playing. Not all the original members, but Dave Manichetti, that's the original guitarist, and Yesterday and Today, then they changed their name to Y&T. They're still playing because I saw them. They played recently around our area. So we got to see quite a few bands. I got to see Thin Lizzy at their heyday when Jailbreak album came out. Pretty amazing. And that was one of the other bands. Mountain and Thin Lizzy were the 2 bands I would say that were so good that a lot of times you'll see a band and you've heard the albums because it's a lot easier in a studio to make the music, right? But to get on stage and reproduce that live, Mountain and Thin Lizzy were the two bands that did that just blew me away. You know, I mean, while you're watching them, you're like, wow, this is better than they were on the album. And it was just it was a magical time, you know. Uh I have another story for that. I had like a big folder with all my album stubs, you know, probably 1,000 album tickets over the years. And my parents passed away, and somehow I lost that. And so I don't even have that anymore. And every once in a while, someone would say, "What concert did you see?" or whatever. And I would have liked to be able to dug through those and find it. But, you know, that's what happens, right?
Yeah, that sounds pretty depressing. I would
Well,
reminds
you
me
know,
of the time my father lost his stamp collection.
yeah, and that was probably worth something. This was just more memorabilia, you
Yeah.
know. And I don't know, Radu. I feel bad because I kind of get off the subject sometimes, so I apologize.
No, it's better than giving one sentence answers.
Yeah, and also too, you know, it's so funny. Everyone asks me the same questions. You know, how did the band get together, or how did you write these songs, or what was your feeling about that, this and that. And I kind of think it's more fun to kind of share stories that maybe no one else has ever heard before.
Yeah, it's definitely
And
better. I mean, you said you have 6 interviews today. I bet they're all gonna ask about the new album or how your band started. I'm trying to figure out what else wasn't he asked about.
yeah, well, you know, the bummer is we recently announced that we're going to probably retire from playing live at the end of next year.
Yeah, well, that's
And you know, a lot of
understandable.
people, yeah, and we just played an album release show the other night, and one of the bigwigs from our record company says, "Why are you doing that?" And I said, "Well, you know, we're getting older, and I think people are getting tired of us." And he goes, "Didn't you just see this show?" He goes, "No one's getting tired of you." And I said, "Well, you know," and I think got to look at it from our standpoint also too. We're getting older, and we retired, or the band broke up in 1991 for various different reasons, right? But when we got back together, there was a thought, hey, we'll play one or two shows maybe, just because people want to see the band. But then it was like a giant snowball rolling downhill. You know, it's picking up speed on its own. You know, we recorded Witch's Game, a single, and then we did uh, Forever Black, and then we did Half Past Human, Dark Parade. Um, but it also kind of reminded us, you know, hey, we were only going to do this for a small period of time. And you know, you're a young man, but at some point in your life when you get older, you'll probably want to like do something, kind of kick back, relax, retire. Maybe there's places you wanted to travel, stuff you want to do with your family or what have you. And we're so busy with the band, a lot of that we can't do. And so I think at the end of next year, plus we have another full year ready with some amazing shows. I think that we'll be able to get back to where we were before the band reunited. And I'm sure there'll be some sadness and regret, but everything has to end someday. And sometimes it's best to go out with a bang.
Mhm.
Now, people have asked me too, is this the end of the band? And I want to assure people that I'm going to do everything I can. I want to keep writing material and putting out some more music. So this isn't really the end of the band. It's just the end of us playing live. Now, is there anything definite planned on that? No, but that's my goal, is to keep playing. I love playing drums. I love writing music. I love putting songs together. Uh, and I got most of the other guys in the band convinced to do that.
All right. Yeah, I figured if he's gonna be asked a question, it's what about the retirement?
Yeah. Well, you know, I just turned 68, and at some point, you know,
Oh, I mean,
and people always ask, well, look, the Rolling Stones are doing that. Well, yeah, but they have their own private jets, you know, and private limousines, you know, and traveling is really hard. A lot of the shows we play in Europe, we'll fly from California to Europe, and sometimes with a flight cancellation, it'll take it 3 full days to get there. And then we're on the ground for maybe 1.5 days. And then we leave in the middle of the night to come home. And boy, this is grueling. If you're 20 years old and you do some of this stuff, it's grueling. And to be our age and doing that, it's just, you know, it's It's hard. I'm not going to lie to you. Uh,
Mhm.
there's some fun involved and excitement and also adventure, but uh, not sleeping for 3 days and like running through airports, and going through security checkpoints, and it's not as much fun as being on stage. That's for sure.
Yeah, I reckon being on stage does make it worth it, but that's just like 10% of the time or less. Yeah, less.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Hey, I have a funny story about that too. When I was a little kid, I was probably 8 or 10 or something, because people start thinking weird stuff. So you got to remember I'm a child. But on my first airplane flight, and this is back in the olden days, it was a jet plane, but it was still a long time ago. And they brought us on board, and this is way different time. But I remember they go, "Oh, this is your first time on board." They let me into the cockpit, and I sat on the pilot's lap, and the stewardess brought me a set of wings, like little wings, like like a junior pilot. And my joke is, the last time we flew, I think the pilot sat on my lap. So anyway, that's every once in a while we get on a plane. I ask the stewardess, I go, "Hey, when I was a kid, I got to go in the cockpit and sit on the pilot's lap. Can I do that?" And you should see the funny look on their face.
All right. I don't think we have that much time left, so I'm trying to mix all the last questions in one. Because Cirith
Certainly.
Ungol was not only influenced by music, but there were a lot of non-music influences, especially literary. Because if I remember correctly, the band was formed like around the literature class, and especially around Tolkien. And I've seen you especially were also a big fan of Lovecraft. So,
Yes.
and Sword and Sorcery is something that I've only interacted with as covers for metal albums. So, for someone like that, what would you explain the literary influences of Cirith Ungol?
Well, when we first got together, that same class that me and Greg went to, they assigned The Lord of the Rings to us to read. Big giant book, 3 books, 700 pages each. So it was a gigantic task. And we were young kids, and we're like, we don't want to read this giant book. But it was an influence on us. And it also got us into the other literature, Conan the Barbarian, uh, Elric, who's on our album covers. There's so much stuff in that sword and sorcery thing. And if you haven't really read any of that, you should pick one of those up, because it's some pretty interesting. Matter of fact, any of these things above me, especially over here, Stormbringer. That's book by Michael Moorcock, our first album. Very good. Um, and it's kind of like I don't know. It'd be like if you looked at a movie today, like the Lord of the Rings movie. In the Sword and Sorcery, there's always the guy with the sword, like Conan or something, and he's always fighting against some ancient evil. And there's always sometimes there's a monster or witch, or it's kind of a generic uh, genre, but some of the authors were so talented that they really brought out amazing stories from it. So that would be my suggestion. I also love all the horror stuff, the H.P. Lovecraft. One of my first stories I ever read, the Dunwich Horror. I don't know if you've read any of that, but boy, that's
Yeah,
that's
I've read a bunch of them. I'm not really sure if Dunwich Horror was among them.
yeah, but that stuff is really good. Um, so I don't know. I think it was something we're growing up. Remember, we're young, so we're kind of like in our formative years. So that's the kind of stuff that's affecting us. When you're young, you're kind of like a blank slate. You haven't read too many books, you haven't heard too much music. And luckily for us, the music and the books that we read were stuff that actually, led to all of this behind me. So,
Mhm.
but anyway, we're very proud of everything we did. We're looking forward to playing some shows the next year. Uh, I think we might be playing in your neck of the woods, I hear.
I hope so. I mean, it would be my last chance.
Yeah. So, you got to get out and do that. Uh, but anyway, Radu, it's been really nice, talking to you. And I know you probably have another couple of questions, but
Yeah,
I want to
time
thank you
time
in
is up.
advance.
I understand.
I want to take this time to thank you for your interest in the band. And uh, boy, I've never been to Romania, but I'd love to go
Yeah,
check out the castles there.
you have to see the Brown Castle.
Yeah, Castle Bron.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the one. That's my favorite. That's the one I wanted to But you have to promise me if I come, you won't impale me.
Uh, I cannot say that. In the 200 years I've lived in Romania, I haven't impaled anyone.
Okay, okay. Well, there's always a first time,
Right.
right?
Okay. Well, it was great talking to you. I hope you have a nice day.
Radu, thank you so very much.
Likewise.